Welcome to From Head to Heart and Home. We are so excited that you're here to listen to our conversation today. This is a channel created by women, empowering women to take intentional action in creating the life they want, with your hosts, Carla Center, subconscious healer, and myself, Shanda Soretti, certified coach. So, you guys, today we have a topic based around um, answers. Okay. All of the answers that you seek. So today's topic, today's narrative is going to be answers within. So I will let Carla open it up and explain what we're going to be talking about. And then we're just going to go ahead and dive right in.
Okay, so answers within. We tend to look outside of us. We tend to do things like we Google search, we ask for advice from others, we look for validation in things that if we really just stopped and listened to ourselves, to our soul, to our heart, we would find the answer. And sometimes it's something that we were like, I would have never guessed that was the answer, but wow, that is the right answer for me.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Shanda.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you were finished. So yeah, I think that this is such a great topic because like Carla was saying, so many times we're seeking answers, right? Like oftentimes we're always seeking answers for things. We have questions that come up, we have ideas and stuff like that. So we're always on this quest to find answers to our questions. And when it comes to the healing journey, we often want to look outside of ourselves, like Carla said. We want to try and find the answers that are out there. And like I was sharing with a client earlier, it's almost like we perceive the answers to be some sort of scavenger hunt that exists in the woods, that we need to go find all the clues and follow the breadcrumbs and find our answers out there somewhere, right? But the truth is that we all have the answers we're searching for within ourselves, like Carla said, in our heart, not from our ego, but within our heart. And when we can learn to turn inward to find those answers within ourselves by asking sometimes uncomfortable questions or exploring uncomfortable topics, this is how we get one step, two step closer to finding what those answers actually are. And in my personal experience on this quest, because do not get me wrong, I have turned outside of myself for answers a lot as well. And so it's something that I always get to remind myself, right? Instead of turning to Google, it's like sitting with your question with yourself. Instead of asking every single person and they give you, 10 different answers, ask yourself the question. So it's really like an unlearning of looking outside of ourselves, which is what we're taught to do. We're taught not to trust our intuition, not to trust our wisdom, and to ask the experts or the professionals, right? And sure, there might be a time and a place where that is necessary and the proper thing to do. But truly, I do believe that we hold our own sacred answers within ourselves, to the questions we specifically seek on our healing journey. So I really want to just start with that. And, you know, Carla, what has your experience been with seeking answers outside of yourself versus turning within?
um, the first off is we are programmed. All
Mm,
of us are programmed. So then when we reach outside of us, we're getting more of what has already been thrown at us that has gotten us to where we're at.
mhm,
Um, like I was just talking with somebody about the holidays and doing Christmas dinner and how stressful it is and how much she doesn't enjoy it, right? She's doing this and this and this and going somewhere else and dragging her partner along, and her partner just does it for her. And when within her heart says we should stay at home and connect and really create our own thing, but that's not what we're taught. We're taught you have to do it a certain way, right? Which is not, it's nothing is one size fits all. We know that. And the way to find out what's right for you is to turn inwardly and trust, but we're not taught that. So we have this like, Well, when I sit and meditate, my brain just keeps going a million miles a minute. I don't have intuition. I mean, if you look, there's a lot of people teaching intuition because we have lost touch with really going within to find the answers.
Yeah. Speaking of the meditation piece, I think it's really important. And again, this came up with clients this past week, and even actually with my partner. And I find, and I used to have the same question around meditating. I was like, I'm not good at it. I can't do it. I don't know how to do it, and all those questions. And what I learned through just trial and error, quite honestly, was that the point of meditating for me, and this might not be true for everybody, but for me, is not to shut everything off and shut everything down and like ignore everything and just have this like vacuum of silence. Because I don't believe for me, I don't know if it's true for anybody else, but I don't believe for me that that's possible, is to like quiet the mind.
Right.
What I believe is my interpretation of quieting your mind is more or less envisioning your brain and your thoughts like a river. Okay. And all of your thoughts are like little, say, we'll call them like little packages that float down the river. So what happens when we're listening to our thoughts and paying attention to our thoughts is we're picking up the packages. Ooh, what's in here? Looking at it and then chucking it back or keeping it or whatever we're doing, right? So we're engaging with all of these pieces that are coming down the river. So imagine like a whole, like the river, if you look upstream, it's just full of packages and you're like, holy cow, my brain is just out of whack right now. I feel overwhelmed. So
Right.
there's that. But when you're meditating, my interpretation is that the things are still in the river, the things are still going down the river. We're just witnessing and watching them go by. So we become a observer of the thoughts as opposed to trying to pick them up all out of the river and like engage with them and inspect them and pick and choose. It's like, nope, there they go. Bye. Right. So, because I used to think that it had to be quiet and it had to be still. And I learned that that was not true for me. Um, and then what you were saying about the holidays and your friend that you were talking to, her heart is telling her to stay home and connect with her partner, yet the societal norm is saying go out and do all the things and run around. So I'm like, I feel like there's not a right or wrong way of doing that. I feel like if the more that you can honor what's on your heart, the better, right? That's more in alignment with what your authentic self wants and how it wants to be expressed. So my encouragement would be, how can you create a both and? How can you do both? How can you go out and see the people who you want to see or want to see you? And how can you also create those pockets of time to connect with your loved ones or your partner or whoever is at home and create those moments of intimacy?
Right. Right. And also for those that maybe somebody did choose to stay home on Christmas Day for whatever reason, and not take that as they don't love me, they don't respect me, or whatever the story that you've told yourself is, because sometimes that's the reason why we go. It's not necessarily to connect that specific day, but because we don't want to have the reactions of other people.
Mm.
And that's a story we tell ourselves, by the way. That might not be how they react. But truly going within and following your heart for what is right for you is a huge deal. It is so important. It's not like somebody's trained you to not go with the flow.
Mm.
This is your soul. Not everybody is the same. We never have been. We weren't born to be the same. We were born to bring our own magic. And the beauty in that is our magic together creates even more beautiful things.
Yeah.
And so, you're missing out and others are missing out when you don't go within for the answers.
Mm.
When you do the, like, I know for me and for coaches that I've talked to back before when I was just doing it all on my own, I would Google stuff when a relationship was wrong and then go there, when really I knew that that was not the answer for me, right? But
Mm.
I didn't trust myself, right? Because one of the reasons why we don't trust ourselves is I got myself into this situation, into feeling like I'm not right. And so how can I trust myself to be right?
Mm.
It's a matter of really trusting yourself is one of the things that we get to do when we're learning to go within for the answers. It's about trusting you.
Yeah, 100%. If we lack trust in ourselves, which by the way, a red flag for that is if we don't trust other people. How we do one thing is how we do everything. So we likely do not trust ourselves. You're not going to go within for your answers. You're not going to go to somebody you don't trust for answers, right? Um, and it's interesting because it's like the the reactions, right, versus the going within. It's like I the way that I guide my clients is that we work on three levels of change. We work on habits, beliefs, and identity. And I believe right now what we're really touching on is the level of identity, which is the deepest level of change, which is where the change work actually sticks for good, right? When you can work on that level, the third level. So the way that we do it is we develop, create new habits, which then we create new beliefs, which together create a new identity. But the interesting thing about the new identity is, like we were saying at the beginning, it's not something that you're going out there and you're finding and you're like, oh, I finally found it. Like, I lost it a long time ago and I finally remember where I left it or where I lost it and I picked it back up again. It's not that. You may have you might feel like you've lost it, right? You've lost your identity, like you don't know who you are, stuff like that. But what I always like to say is that as opposed to it being lost or you being lost, because then you need to find it, it's just a disconnection. And I believe when we can speak in that language of a disconnect, it seems a lot more doable and possible, right? It's like hopeful that we can reconnect something. Because think of like an outlet, like a lamp with a plug that's connected to the wall. If the lamp is unplugged from the wall and the plug is sitting on the floor and you can see it that it's unplugged, you're like, oh, I'll just go plug it back in. But when we start talking about something being lost, all of a sudden we're like, well, I don't know where it is. I don't know where to look. I don't know where to start. And so automatically we're left with these feelings of despair or like uncertainty or lack of hope. Right. So I really like to try and make it as simple as possible by just encouraging you to think about it as like dust that has settled, the dust being trauma, challenges, obstacles, difficult situations, whatever you've been through in your life. So your life experience, it creates this dust that settles on top of your identity. So it gets covered and it gets buried, which then creates a disconnection. You can't see it anymore. It's still there, but you can't see it. So what you need to do is you need to start dusting it off, cleaning it up. And the way that you do that is through taking action and through doing things like self care, creating boundaries, putting in the work and taking the action to move yourself forward. Those are the things, in my opinion, that will clear up the dust and kind of remove all this gunk that's piled up.
Right. I completely agree. It's the not only self-care, but self-respect, respecting yourself and learning to trust yourself.
Mm.
So when women often say, I don't know who I am anymore, because we are stuck in our labels. We're stuck in what society told us a good mom is, what society's told us a good partner is, a good daughter, a good sister, whatever. You can pick the label. We have a million of them. And so then that's part of where we learn to live outside ourselves. We're so busy trying to meet those expectations that we believe, and maybe nobody even said them to us, but that's what we've gathered in the information outside of us that is everywhere. Yeah. And so we're trying to fit in this thing, and we no longer even know how to ask ourselves, who am I? What do I like? When somebody describes me, and they're like, if they call me nice, am I really nice? Am I a people pleaser? Am I really intelligent? All of those questions come, you don't know because somebody's told you are. and you've never really sat down and thought about, who am I? What really deep down in my soul is the person I am, the person that has the answers that are right for me.
Yeah, I think you make a really great point in the labels, in societal labels, right? And I mean, what happens typically is that we start to identify with the label.
Right.
So, yet again, we're disconnecting from our authenticity to connect to a label that likely isn't a great representation of who we are. And keep in mind that we are multifaceted beings, right? We have many different parts. And I've talked about this before, but parts work is one of my favorite things to do with clients because of that reason. We have so many parts within ourselves, and none of them are wrong and none of them are all completely right. It's that togetherness, the union of all of them that make up who we are. That's why sometimes we feel nice, or sometimes we feel maybe not so nice, or sometimes we feel sassy or grumpy or agitated. Those are just all parts of who we are. And the more that we try to ignore or remove, like sever the parts of us that we don't like, right, based on labels, societal norms, whatever, the more we try to sever those parts of us, the further and further and further away we're getting from our true authentic self, from our true identity, right? So we're just creating a bigger and bigger gap. So it's like encouraging yourself to let all the different parts of you be okay, right? Don't make any of them wrong. And if you can, get to know these parts on a more intimate level, like instead of being afraid for like a certain part of you to come online, welcome it and encourage it so that you can actually get to know it better and understand why it exists in the first place.
Right. And know that our traumas and our experiences are one of the reasons why parts of us we have decided are not okay.
Hmm.
You know, and also a reason why we focus on certain things, like say you had a hard relationship with your mom. You are going to do everything possible to not allow your child to be that way, or you're going to follow in her footsteps and then like berate yourself for it. There are all kinds of, and it has to do with the trauma and not who you truly are, by the way. That's one of the reasons why Shanda and I work with people on their traumas,
Yes.
is because you're buried in something that's not you, and you oh my gosh, are we critical of ourselves for all of that stuff. And when you dig out from that and are connected to who you are, you're like, oh my gosh, why did I think that that was not okay? Why did I think like one of my, I've told everybody, I was the good girl, right? So anything I did that somebody else disapproved of, I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I do that? And so I would hide in the background, because it's much easier to be the smart good girl in the background than to share your thoughts that may not be congruent with everyone else's.
Hmm.
And especially when you do self-help, you're a coach, that is not always what others would think or say, because they're like, oh my gosh, what do you mean? What do you mean? I No way is that okay, because it doesn't fit with what I currently am seeing on the outside that's okay in my life.
Hmm.
I challenge people, and I wouldn't do that. And I have clients that are the same way. They're like these amazing women that are afraid to speak their truth because it challenges somebody else. But when they're truly connected, it's not this quiet background person.
Yeah. Yeah, it's what you're talking about kind of reminds me of, this is a bit of my personal story too. Um Transcending something, right? Like healing and moving through something versus swinging the pendulum, right? So what I mean is like there came a time in my life where I thought that I had transcended my trauma. Ooh, right? Like I really thought that I had healed it and moved past it and all this stuff. And I was very wrong. I was very wrong. What I did instead was almost swing the pendulum in the opposite direction, from fear of being like a certain person, or
Mhm.
turning out like a certain person, or taking action like a certain person. So I was avoiding and running and trying to kind of overcompensate so that I wouldn't end up like a certain person, right? But what happened was then I ended up way on the other side, right?
Mhm.
And so I had to figure out how to come back to the middle ground somewhere, right? I had started here, I ran away from here, I swung all the way over here and realized, hang on a minute, there's still an imbalance. So I had to come back and find my middle, which again would be my authenticity, my true identity, and learn how to live in alignment with that part of myself, right? So that middle alignment being the driver, not saying I'll never go over here or I'll never go over here. No, because those are all parts of us. Like if you can think of I don't know, a branch, right? There's like a thick branch in the middle, and then there's the little twitch branches that come off. Those are all parts of who we are, but the main piece is that middle alignment. And that's where we want to spend most of our time, but it is not where we're going to spend all of our time. It's like it's like when I hear clients say something about, I'm doing the work, but I'm not doing it all the time. That is something that I just heard this past week from a client verbatim. And I said, you know what? We're human. We're not always 100% going to be doing anything all the time. That's just not realistic. But the goal being that we're always engaged with it. It's always at the forefront of our mind, right? So that over time, we don't let out too much rope, too much slack, and stray really far away, right? So there will be times where you will end up over here for a little longer, but you'll come back, and over here and you'll come back. And that's okay. That's just human, right? That's just being human. Um, but really making sure that your focus is on that alignment, right? That you're listening to that inner alignment, all of those answers that come within that will ultimately guide you down your path with ease, if we're able to just open up and listen.
Right. And when we don't make those being on this side or that side as bad, but learning experiences, right? Because the work, we are human, the work is not about being perfect. Because then again, you're going outward and doing exactly what we said and not trusting that you're finding your own path that is your balance. If we stop comparing ourselves and judging ourselves and really just like focus on our authenticity, which, you know, when there's so much more joy in authenticity, once you have that, then being who somebody else told you to be, it's exhausting.
Mm,
You'd be surprised at how much energy you have, right? The more you go within.
right. Yes. And speaking of balance, um, for me, uh, um, a way that I'm able to tap into and cultivate this balance, because sometimes we're out of balance. And red flag, everybody, you feel it in your body. You might ignore it, but you will feel it in your body, and it will get louder and louder. Your symptoms, whatever they might be, will turn up, will show up more, will be more intense. So if you start to feel discomfort in your body, pay attention to it. It's your body trying to communicate something is out of whack, something is out of balance. So the balance resides again in your body. That's where our answers are. So the question that you can ask yourself is, does this feel good? Whatever it is that you're doing, does this feel good? Would be step one. Step two would be asking yourself, is this in alignment with where I'm headed, with where I want to go? Because something can feel good, like being lazy, right?
Mhm.
But it's not going to bring you closer to the results you want. So, does this feel good in my body, not in my mind? Can I make sense of it? No. Does it feel good in my body? And is it in alignment with where I want to go? So, those are your two kind of questions that you can ask yourself to help you tap back into finding balance within yourself. It's all to do with your body, right? Ego stays out of it. Ego will try and talk you one way or the other, depending on, what it's trying to avoid or trying to get. So going into our heart, going into our body, asking those questions, and honestly, allowing the space to just wait for the learning and the information to come through. Having patience with yourself. It might take you multiple times of asking for you to actually hear it, right? Yeah. And I know, Carla, both you and I, over the last week or so, have had our own personal body ailments pop up. And it's about finding that balance to get ourselves back in check, right?
Right. Finding what is that I really need rest and what is avoidance.
Right.
Avoidance, procrastination. I'm going to the next level. It's scary. You may not admit it to yourself, but like you're like, I don't know what this means if I step through this fear. What is really on the other side of this? I really want A, B, and C, but what's the rest of it? Or what if I step through and I create this and others around me aren't happy with it? They're, really sitting there and asking yourself, like Shanda said, like, I have been ill and there's some things that I'm doing. I'm working on, I'm creating a podcast, I'm doing all kinds of things that are new. And am I really ill? There are people in my household that have had some symptoms, but it really hit me. And I knew that there was something that I was avoiding unconsciously. Our subconscious mind is trying to keep us safe. And it's not necessarily what we want keeping us safe, which is that we do the same things over and over again. And I have worked with clients that are like, I realize that every time I'm going to the next step, I get a cold or I have this going on. Whereas others, they have come to me when they have ignored it. Their body is like, there's all kinds of really autoimmune disorders have gotten them because they've ignored it and they've just rested and they've not stepped on to the next level.
Yeah.
So there's that, really, like Shanda said, you're going within and finding what is right for you.
Yeah. I love what you were saying about, there's that fear when we're about to step through. You were saying something about, I think it was along the lines of, is this going to work? Is this not going to work, for whatever reasons, right? And here's the beauty of that action. Regardless of the fear of, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? Do you know what you're going to get? You're going to receive feedback, whether it worked or it didn't work. You're gonna be like, oh, how wonderful. This brought me one step closer to where I want to go. Or, oh, how wonderful. This isn't the right step for me. And now I know and can move on to something different. Right. So again, it's like, that's another answer, but we can only tap into that answer by listening and doing the thing we're being called to do within ourselves. Right. So knowing that the worst possible thing that can happen by listening to yourself is you're going to receive an answer. That's it. That's the worst thing that can happen. You're going to get an answer. And how beautiful is that? Because that just clarifies the vision, the path, and the stepping stones as you go. It's like clearing the fog away, right? So that you can see a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further, and you just keep going and following your heart until you land on that spot. And by the way, what I find to be true with all of my clients across the board is that they don't even yet realize when they're on that stone that they've been looking for and trying to get to for so long. They don't even know. So that is one of my fun jobs, and one of my fun duties is that I get to point that out and be like, hey, hang on a second. You get to acknowledge, like, you're here. You've arrived at this stepping stone. Let's celebrate.
Right. That's beautiful, because we get so busy looking at what's ahead of us or
Mhm.
what's behind us, that we don't
Yes.
see the stone we're on. We don't see how far we've made it. We don't celebrate. I have been so in touch with me, and I've done the inspired actions, and look where I got myself.
Yeah.
Look where I got myself.
Yeah. So, what I want to say to everybody listening is no matter where you are in your journey, beginning, middle, I don't believe there's an end, but long time on the road, acknowledging every single step along the way, right? It's like I have multiple sayings that mean the same thing, but you know, small hinges swing big doors. So it's those small incremental things that we usually take for granted that end up getting the massive results. Um, what do they say? Your tomorrow is a bunch of yeses stacked on top of each other or something like that. So it's like it's the little tiny minute detail that we often overlook and don't celebrate and don't acknowledge that make the most difference. So acknowledge every single step you take, congratulate yourself, celebrate, and share it with people in your life. If you really like sharing things on social media, share your wins. Share them with your friends and your family and create that ripple in your life into the people's lives that you love and that are in your life so that you can maybe inspire them to want to do the same for themselves.
That's really beautiful. And the while you're doing all those stacking on top of each other, instead of saying this is what all the bad things that could happen, like diminishing what you've done, don't diminish, don't
Mm.
settle. You had this inspired action for a reason. That's the part of the connecting with yourself. You did not have that inspired action for no reason.
Mm.
Even if it takes you to a space that you didn't like Shanda said, then you're like, okay, so this wasn't for me. But there is something underneath the lesson you learned in that that is going to take you where you want to be.
Yeah.
And celebrate those too. Celebrate all these little like awakenings as you're so connected with who you are that you're like, I had no idea what really was possible for me.
Mm. Yeah. I want to encourage everybody to do like I'm just taking a note here to in order to almost keep a record of the things that we learn and the things that we've accomplished so that we can actually celebrate those things. This is why journaling or even just keeping like a bullet point kind of list of like what you're working on, what you're moving through, what's coming up, what you're healing, those types of things, and do like a weekly audit or a weekly check-in. Maybe not, let's not use the word audit. That sounds really like intense. Let's just say a weekly check-in. So once a week, say every Monday morning or Sunday night, sit down and kind of review your week. Like what were some of your challenges? What did you move through? What are you on the precipice of? Like what's coming? And then over time, over weeks of compiling your sheets, you'll be able to kind of reflect back and see what you've actually transitioned through and come out on the other side so that you can actually really acknowledge each one of those pieces individually and celebrate them, right? Because every win is worth celebrating. Every aha moment, every insight, every moment of clarity is something worth celebrating because it's something you didn't have access to before. All right. And all of those aha moments lead to your transformation into your breakthrough.
Right. And as you journal and then look back, there's some awareness that comes from that because you see your patterns. You see the things that you have stepped through, but also the places that you were like, oh, I had no idea I was continuously doing this over and over and over again. And this is not working for me.
Mm.
That's journaling and letting it out is a way of connecting with yourself also, because instead of being in our head, because if you really journal and don't make it about being right, you just let it all out, you can see patterns, you can see so much about yourself. And that is another way, by the way, besides the meditation, to really connect with you. Just allow it, because then we're not always, it may start, depends on the person, in your head. I know that I bought probably 20 journals before I really
Ah,
used a journal more than like, a month or two. And because I was in my head. And so I always encourage clients, just free write. Like the beginning stuff might be very, very in your head, but the more you go, if you just allow yourself to not judge what you write down, to just let it go, you can see patterns and honest connection with yourself.
Yeah, noticing the patterns is really important because a sentence or a phrase that I hear often with clients um, is that, you know, they had this pattern, but they're like, well, it's not as much, or it doesn't happen as often, or something along those lines. And as great as that is, right, that means that progress has been made. It's still an indicator that that root is still there, right? That there's still some healing that gets to be done. There's still some work that gets to be done around that. So really paying attention to the patterns that are still showing up, because we can heal parts of things. If we think of our patterns being like a woven strand, right, with a bunch of different strands that are all twined together, and we start to unravel those pieces, then we might have worked on one, but maybe there's still several over here that haven't been worked on, or vice versa. So we really want to make sure that we follow it all the way to the root, so that we can really transform whatever that root is into something that can work to your benefit, as opposed to working against you.
Right. And to think of it as like, I Shanda thinks of a thread and I think of shattered glass. It all breaks and we can pick up the big parts and we think that it's all gone, but there's little shards that we have to do the cleanup for. And when we are seeing those patterns, and maybe they are that diminished, but they're still somewhere. And so there are places we probably don't acknowledge where it's also just sneaking in, right? And seeing those patterns, really seeing what's in here, is our way of clearing it up to go forward.
Yeah.
Getting every shard of that root out.
Yes. Beautiful. Yeah. So, I mean, to anybody who's listening, if you know you had your own personal experience that you're aware of, right, that you're like, yes, I can relate to this, share it with us, right? Put it below, put it in the comments. Let us kind of help you iron out those pieces, so that we can get you headed on the right path. And I'd like to know, Carla, is there anything else that you would like to offer the listeners today, insight wise or action step wise?
um I just want to say that don't make yourself wrong. We talk about this often. Connect with yourself and see the beauty in you, and not as you're connecting looking for what's wrong with me.
Mm, yeah, beautiful. I love that, because there is nothing wrong with any of us, right? We are all perfectly wonderful, whole human beings. Sometimes we're just disconnected. So, I want to leave you guys with that piece of information. And I guess my tip today would be to start writing. If you're not writing things down, you're not documenting your success, you're not journaling, anything like that, I would start that process somewhere. I was reading an article the other day about how when we document our life, there's a lot of healing in just documenting our own life, almost like as if we were to create a book or something, right? Like a biography. And I think there's a lot of power in that, in writing things, because when we write, it's a form of release, right? So sometimes, depending on what the thing you're writing about is, you could find the release that you're looking for just by writing it down and getting it out of your head, right? And when we do that, we're actually creating more space and more capacity for new things to come in and fill up our brain as well. So that's what I want to encourage you guys, is to start writing things, whatever those things might be. Just start somewhere. Go get a fancy little journal, or not, just grab a piece of paper and write on the back side of it. Just start somewhere. Okay? So, um, I want to thank Carla for this beautiful conversation today. I want to thank all of the listeners for joining us and tuning into our channel, From Head to Heart and Home, with Carla and I. You know, we're so joyed that you can join us on these conversations that we have every week. And if you enjoy this conversation, please click the subscribe button below so that you get the notifications when our new episodes come out every week. And be sure to join us next week for another connected conversation. And we look forward to seeing you there. All right, everybody, have a wonderful rest of your day and week. Bye bye.
Bye.